Athens in mourning is a city wrapped in shadows, even when the sun shines bright over the Acropolis. Every 9 years, the same ritual of grief descends upon the great city like a plague, turning mothers into weeping statues and fathers into hollow shells of men. Today is that day once more, the day when Crete demands its tribute and Athens must pay in the blood of its children. In the great harbor of Piraeus, a ship painted entirely in black waits at the dock like a floating tomb. Its sails hang limp in the still air, and even the sailors who crew it move with the reluctance of men walking to their own execution. This is the tribute ship, and its cargo will not be gold or grain, but 14 young lives sacrificed to satisfy the vengeance of a foreign king. The story of this terrible tribute begins a generation earlier, with pride and tragedy, intertwined like the threads of fate. King Minos of Crete, the most powerful ruler in all the Mediterranean world, had sent his son Androgeos to compete in the Panathenaic Games in Athens. The young prince excelled in every competition, winning laurel after laurel, bringing glory to Crete and shame to Athenian pride. But glory breeds jealousy, and jealousy breeds violence. Whether it was King Aegeus of Athens himself who ordered the assassination, or merely ambitious Athenians who could not bear to see their champions defeated, the result was the same. Prince Androgeos was found dead on the road from Athens, his blood soaking into Greek soil. King Minos' grief transformed into rage that shook the very foundations of the world. His navy, the greatest the world had ever seen, blockaded Athens until the city faced starvation. When Athens finally surrendered, the peace terms were brutal beyond imagination. Every 9 years, Athens must send 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete to be fed to the Minotaur, the monster that dwelled in the heart of an impossible maze.
Now, as the 3rd tribute year arrives, all of Athens gathers in the agora to witness the lottery that will decide which families lose their children. Mothers clutch their sons and daughters close, fathers stand with faces carved from stone, and the young people themselves try to appear brave while their hearts hammer with terror. The bronze urn sits upon a raised platform containing small tokens, most blank, but 14 bearing the mark of death. The priest of Apollo reaches in with trembling hands, drawing out each token with the slow inevitability of fate itself. One by one, names are called, and one by one, families are destroyed. A fisherman's daughter, barely 15, collapses when her name is called. A merchant's son tries to run, but is caught by the city guards. A potter's apprentice accepts his fate with quiet dignity that breaks more hearts than screaming would. Each selection tears another wound in the city's soul, until 13 have been chosen, and only one selection remains.
High on the Acropolis, in the royal palace that overlooks the city, Prince Theseus watches the lottery proceedings with mounting fury. He is the son of King Aegeus and the rightful heir to Athens' throne, but he has been raised far from the city, in the court of his mother's father in Trojan. Only recently has he returned to claim his birthright, and what he finds appalls him. Theseus is not like other princes who grow soft in palace luxury. His body is hardened by years of adventure on the road to Athens, where he had cleared the isthmus of bandits and monsters, earning a reputation as a hero before anyone knew his royal blood. His mind is sharp as any blade, and his sense of justice burns hotter than Olympic flame. As he watches the 14th name being drawn, a young woman who faints dead away when selected, something inside Theseus breaks. This is not justice. This is not tribute. This is Athens sacrificing its future to pay for past crimes, feeding its children to a monster rather than standing up to tyranny. He storms into his father's throne room, where King Aegeus sits hunched upon his throne like a man already dead. The king is old now, worn down by years of guilt and helplessness, watching generation after generation of Athenian youth sail away to die. When he sees his son's face, he knows immediately what Theseus is about to say, and his heart clenches with preemptive grief.
Theseus declares that he will take the place of one of the chosen tributes. He will sail to Crete and face the Minotaur himself. If Athens cannot defeat Minos through war, then perhaps one hero can succeed where armies have failed. He will enter the labyrinth, kill the monster, and end this cycle of sacrifice forever. Aegeus pleads with his son, his voice breaking with desperation. The Minotaur has never been defeated. The labyrinth is impossible to navigate. Designed by Daedalus, the greatest architect who ever lived, it is a maze so complex that even its builder could barely find his way out. Those who enter never return, either devoured by the monster or lost forever in endless corridors of stone. But Theseus's mind is made up. He has not traveled across all of Greece, defeating bandits and monsters, claiming his father's throne and his birthright, only to sit safe in a palace while children die in his name. If he is to be king of Athens, then he must be willing to die for Athens. And if he is to die, then let it be in defiance of tyranny rather than in acceptance of it. The king, seeing that no argument will change his son's mind, makes one request. The tribute ship always sails with black sails, marking it as a vessel of death and mourning. But if Theseus somehow survives, if he defeats the impossible monster and escapes the inescapable maze, then he must change the sails to white before returning. That way, as the ship approaches Athens, Aegeus will know from his watchpoint on the cliffs whether his son lives or dies. Theseus promises solemnly. Black sails for death, white sails for victory. His father will not have to wait in agonizing uncertainty. One glance at the approaching ship will tell him everything.
The tribute ship departs on a morning when even the sun seems reluctant to rise, as if the heavens themselves mourn what is about to transpire. The 14 young Athenians, 13 lottery victims, and Prince Theseus stand at the rail as their home city grows smaller behind them, many of them weeping openly, knowing they will never see Athens again. The other tributes regard Theseus with mixed emotions. Some are grateful that a prince would share their fate rather than remaining safe in his palace. Others resent him, thinking his presence makes a mockery of their suffering, a hero playing at sacrifice when he surely has some plan for escape. A few, the wisest among them, recognize in Theseus their only hope of survival and draw close to him, seeking whatever comfort leadership can provide. The voyage across the wine-dark sea takes 3 days, and during that time, Theseus gets to know his companions in doom. There is Phaedra's brother Marcus, a young man of 19 who is studying to be a sculptor, his hands already showing the calluses of his craft. There is Helena, 16 years old, who had been preparing for her wedding when the lottery took her name. There is young Nicias, only 14, who tries to be brave but cries himself to sleep each night. Theseus spends the voyage learning their stories, memorizing their names, promising them that if he falls and they somehow survive, someone should remember who they were. But privately, in the dark of night when he stands alone at the bow watching the stars, he makes a different vow. They will not all die. He will find a way to save them, or die trying. On the morning of the 3rd day, the island of Crete rises from the sea like a paradise that has forgotten its own cruelty. The harbor of Knossos gleams with white stone and brilliant paint. Ships from every nation crowd the docks, and the famous palace of King Minos sprawls across the hillside in impossible complexity. This is the center of the civilized world, the greatest power in the Mediterranean, and Athens is nothing but a tribute-paying vassal to its might. As the black-sailed ship docks, Cretan guards board immediately, their bronze armor gleaming, their spears held ready. The Athenian tributes are herded onto the dock like cattle, surrounded by guards who neither speak to them nor meet their eyes. To the Cretans, these young people are already dead, ghosts walking, their lives already claimed by the monster that waits in the labyrinth's heart. The palace of Knossos is a wonder that takes the breath away even from those who know they march toward death. Walls are painted with elaborate frescoes showing dolphins leaping through waves, priestesses dancing with sacred bulls, gardens blooming with flowers that seem alive enough to sway in painted wind. Corridors branch and twist in patterns that echo the greater labyrinth beneath the palace until the tributes are thoroughly disoriented and entirely dependent on their guards to lead them. In the great throne room, King Minos sits upon a chair carved from a single massive piece of alabaster, his white beard flowing down his chest like a waterfall, his eyes as cold and unyielding as the stone beneath him. He is ancient now, but his grief for his murdered son has not diminished with age. If anything, it has hardened into something as permanent and implacable as the labyrinth itself. Beside him sit his daughters, Ariadne and Phaedra, princesses of Crete, beauties whose fame has spread across the entire Mediterranean world. Ariadne, the elder, has hair like midnight and eyes that hold depths of intelligence and compassion. Phaedra, younger and more playful, watches the proceedings with the curiosity of someone who has lived her whole life in paradise and never truly understood suffering. When the Athenian tributes are brought before the throne, King Minos' gaze sweeps over them with the dispassion of a man counting livestock. 14 more lives to feed to his grief, 14 more deaths to balance against the death of his beloved son. His speech is one he has given 3 times before, and will give again in 9 years if this cycle continues. Athens has sinned, and Athens must pay. The Minotaur hungers, and Athens must feed it. There is no mercy in his voice, no room for negotiation or plea.
But then his eyes fall upon Theseus, and something shifts in his expression. The Prince of Athens stands differently from the others, not with the resignation of the condemned, but with the bearing of a warrior preparing for battle. His eyes meet the king's without flinching, and in that gaze, Minos sees something he has not seen in previous tributes: defiance. The king asks who this young man is, and when Theseus identifies himself as the Prince of Athens, son of Aegeus, come voluntarily to face the Minotaur, a strange smile plays across Minos' weathered face. So Athens finally sends someone with courage rather than just victims to the slaughter. Good. The Minotaur has grown bored with prey that only runs and screams. A hero will make the hunt more interesting. But it is not King Minos whose attention Theseus has captured most completely. Beside the throne, Princess Ariadne leans forward, her dark eyes fixed upon the Athenian prince with an intensity that makes her sister Phaedra glance at her in surprise. In the princess's face, something is stirring, an emotion she has never felt before, or perhaps a rebellion against the endless cycle of death that has defined her life in this palace of wonders and horrors.
That night, as the tributes are locked in the palace dungeons to await their morning doom, Ariadne paces her chambers high in the palace, unable to sleep. For years, she has watched the tributes arrive every 9 years, has seen the terror in their eyes, has heard their screams echoing up from the labyrinth below. She has grown numb to it, accepted it as the price of her father's grief and Crete's honor. But something about the Athenian prince has shattered that numbness. The way he stood before her father without begging for mercy or accepting defeat. The way he comforted the other tributes even though he faces the same doom. The courage in his eyes, burning like a flame that refuses to be extinguished by the darkness surrounding it. Ariadne knows things that few others in the palace know. As the eldest daughter of Minos, she has been privy to secrets, has access to knowledge that could mean the difference between death and survival in the labyrinth. She knows where the monster sleeps and when. She knows that there is a pattern to the maze, a logic known only to its creator, the master craftsman Daedalus, who is now himself a prisoner in Crete. More importantly, she knows that Daedalus once told her something that could save a life. The labyrinth can be navigated if one has a way to mark one's path, to always know the route back to the entrance. The corridors may twist and branch endlessly, but they are still just corridors, and any maze can be solved with patience and a method. As dawn approaches, Ariadne makes a decision that will change the course of her life forever. She takes from her chamber a ball of golden thread, woven from the finest wool in all of Crete, a gift that was meant to be part of her wedding dowry. She wraps a dark cloak around her shoulders to hide her royal finery, and makes her way through the sleeping palace to the dungeons where the tributes wait for morning.
The guard at the dungeon entrance is an old soldier who has served her family for decades.
When he sees the princess approaching in the pre-dawn darkness, he straightens immediately, but she places a finger to her lips, begging silence. She tells him she wishes to pray for the souls of the condemned, a final mercy before they face their doom. The old soldier, who has daughters of his own, steps aside. In the cell, the tributes sleep fitfully, or not at all, huddled together for comfort in the darkness. Only Theseus is awake, sitting with his back against the wall, his eyes fixed on some distant point only he can see, preparing his mind for the battle to come. When he sees the cloaked figure enter, he rises smoothly to his feet, moving to place himself between the intruder and his sleeping companions. Ariadne pulls back her hood, and in the dim torchlight, Theseus sees her face clearly for the first time. The Princess of Crete stands before him, and in her hands she holds something that glows like captured sunlight, a ball of golden thread. She speaks quickly and quietly, her words tumbling over each other in her urgency. She wants to help him, though she can barely explain why, even to herself. This endless cycle of death has gone on too long, and perhaps it is time for someone to break it. She offers him the thread and explains its purpose. Tie one end to the entrance of the labyrinth and unwind the ball as he walks, leaving a trail that will guide him back even through the maze's impossible complexity. But the thread alone is not enough. She tells him what she knows of the Minotaur, that it sleeps during the morning hours, exhausted from its nightly wandering through the maze, that it is strongest in the darkness, but confused by sudden light, that it was once her half-brother, before the curse transformed him, and sometimes in its roars she still hears traces of the boy it once was. Theseus listens intently, committing every detail to memory, but he is also studying the princess herself. She risks everything by helping him. If her father discovers this betrayal, no amount of love will save her from punishment. Why would she do this for a stranger, for an enemy of her people? Ariadne cannot fully answer that question, not even to herself. Perhaps it is the injustice of it all, 14 lives taken for one life lost, and that price paid over and over again, generation after generation. Perhaps it is the courage she saw in Theseus's eyes, a defiance that awakened something in her own heart that had been sleeping. Or perhaps it is something simpler and more profound, the recognition of kindred spirit, the spark that ignites between two souls even when kingdoms and blood debts stand between them. She has one more gift to offer, a sword, taken from her father's armory, ancient and blessed by the gods. The Minotaur's hide is thick as leather, and mortal weapons sometimes fail to penetrate it. But this blade has never known failure, and perhaps it will serve where others have not. As the first light of dawn begins to creep through the dungeon windows, Ariadne makes Theseus promise one thing. If he survives, if he defeats the Minotaur and escapes the labyrinth, he must take her with him. She cannot remain in Crete after this betrayal, cannot return to being the dutiful daughter who watches tribute after tribute disappear into death. She chooses him, chooses Athens, chooses a life of uncertainty over a life of comfortable complicity. Theseus takes her hand and promises. If the gods grant him victory over the Minotaur, he will take her back to Athens and make her his wife, a queen worthy of a hero's love. But both of them know that survival is far from certain, and this may be both their first and last meeting.
As the sun rises fully over Crete, the tributes are led from the dungeons to the entrance of the labyrinth. The entire court gathers to witness the ritual, nobles in their finest clothes, priests chanting prayers to appease the gods, guards standing at attention. King Minos watches from a raised platform, his face carved from stone, his grief as fresh as the day his son died. The entrance to the labyrinth is a massive doorway carved into the hillside beneath the palace, flanked by columns painted to look like bull's horns. Beyond the threshold, only darkness is visible, a darkness so complete it seems to swallow light itself. From somewhere deep within comes a sound that freezes blood and stops hearts, the distant bellowing of something that was never meant to exist, a voice that is half human scream and half bull's roar. The 13 other tributes clutch at each other in terror, and several begin to weep openly. They know what awaits them in that darkness, a death that will be neither quick nor merciful, torn apart by claws and teeth in corridors where their screams will echo until the stones themselves grow tired of hearing them. But Theseus walks forward steadily, the ball of golden thread hidden in his robes, the blessed sword concealed beneath his cloak. He turns to face his companions and speaks to them with a voice that carries authority and hope in equal measure. They must stay together, must move quietly, must trust him to lead them. He has a plan, he tells them, though he cannot reveal it yet.
They must believe that not all who enter the labyrinth are doomed to die within it. Some of the tributes take courage from his words, others remain paralyzed by fear, but all of them follow as Theseus leads them across the threshold and into the darkness, because following a slim hope is better than standing still in certain doom. The moment they cross into the labyrinth, the massive stone door grinds shut behind them, with the finality of a tomb being sealed. The sound echoes through the corridor like thunder, and in the darkness ahead, something answers with a roar that shakes dust from the ceiling. The Minotaur knows they have arrived. The hunt has begun. Theseus quickly ties one end of the golden thread to an iron ring set in the wall beside the entrance, then begins to unwind the ball as they move deeper into the maze. The corridor branches almost immediately, left or right, no way to know which is correct. He chooses left, marking the decision in his mind, beginning to build a mental map even as the thread builds a physical one. The labyrinth is unlike anything the Athenians have ever seen. The corridors twist and turn without apparent logic, sometimes climbing steep stairs only to descend again to the same level. Rooms open into other rooms that should be impossible based on where they just came from. Passages loop back on themselves, or seem to, until the tributes are thoroughly disoriented and entirely dependent on the thread to find their way back. The walls are carved with images that seem to move in the flickering light of Theseus' torch. Bulls dancing, humans transforming, scenes of violence and ecstasy that blur together until it's impossible to tell which is which. In some chambers, they find the remains of previous tributes, bones picked clean, weapons that failed their owners, scraps of cloth that were once fine Athenian dress.
And always, echoing through the stone corridors, comes the sound of the Minotaur. Sometimes it seems close enough to be just around the next corner. Other times it sounds impossibly distant, as if coming from miles away. The creature is hunting them, Theseus realizes, using the maze it knows intimately to herd them deeper into its domain, cutting off escape routes, driving them towards some killing ground of its choosing. Hours pass in the darkness. The tributes grow exhausted, their terror gradually giving way to a numb exhaustion more dangerous than fear. Several beg to stop and rest, but Theseus drives them forward. To stop is to die. They must keep moving, must use these hours when the Minotaur is still playing with them to penetrate deeper into the labyrinth, to reach its heart before it decides to end the game. Finally, as the golden thread grows thin and they must be near the labyrinth's center, they enter a chamber larger than any they have yet encountered. The ceiling soars overhead, lost in darkness beyond the reach of their torchlight. The walls are carved with a spiral pattern that makes the eyes ache to follow it. And in the center of the chamber, arranged in a circle like the petals of some terrible flower, lie the bones of hundreds of victims. This is the Minotaur's lair. This is where the hunt always ends. From somewhere in the darkness above them comes a sound of breathing, deep and slow, the rhythm of something massive sleeping heavily. Theseus raises his torch higher and finally sees it. The Minotaur, sleeping on a ledge carved high in the chamber wall, its massive form barely visible in the shadows. Even asleep, the creature is terrifying beyond description. Its body is that of a man, but scaled up to impossible size. Easily 8 feet tall, massively muscled, skin that looks as thick and tough as bull hide. But its head is that of a bull, massive and crowned with horns that could gore a man through with ease. In sleep, it almost looks peaceful, but its claws dig into the stone beneath it, scoring grooves even in rest. Theseus turns to the other tributes and gives them their instructions in a whisper barely louder than breath. They must remain absolutely silent. They must stay in this chamber, near the entrance where the thread can guide them back. He will face the Minotaur alone, and if he falls, they must run. Follow the thread back to the entrance, pound on the door, beg for mercy, even though none will likely be given. At least then there is a chance, however slim. Several of the tributes protest, wanting to help, to fight beside him. But Theseus is firm. He is their prince, and this is his task. They have already shown courage simply by following him this far into darkness. Now they must trust him one more time. He draws the blessed sword that Ariadne gave him, feeling its perfect balance, sensing the divine power forged into its bronze. Then, leaving the torch with his companions,
He begins to climb the carved handholds in the wall that lead up to the Minotaur's ledge. Below him, 13 young Athenians hold their breath and pray to every god they know. Above him, the Minotaur sleeps on, unaware that its final hunt is about to begin.